then. But that's not the reason, of course, that Mariam is here. To give you a quick introduction, she's a pedagogue of the French language and literature and a writer of fiction for children and adults. She was educated at JNU and at the Sorbonne in Paris. She loves writing. Her first book for children was Tales Old and New, which was published by Harper Collins India in 1994. Her first novel, My Little Boat, was published by Penguin in 2003. It was nominated for the IMPAC International Award in 2005. The second one was The Bereavement of Agnes Desmoulins.
It was published as The Street of Mists.
Okay, The Street of Mists. And it was longlisted for the Man Asian Prize in 2010. Her first play, The Betrayal of Selvamarywas, was shortlisted by Hindu Metro Plus for the Playwright Award in 2010. And I've seen that play being performed actually at Epicenter in Gurgaon. So Mariam it's actually an honor to have Mariam with us at the FDC. And I think there is so much that we will be able to gain and learn, and inspiration that we'll find by talking to her. So Mariam, I did share a little bit about what the First Draft Club is, but as a very quick recap, it's essentially a group of people. We are all writers, wannabe writers, published authors who are all striving to try and get a lot of writing done in the month of September. And to that end, what we are trying to do is set ourselves a goal, and then we are trying to make sure that we meet that goal on a daily basis, and we progress. We share our progress with other people, and we all chat.
That's very commendable. Yeah. That's very commendable. End of September. It's right here.
Yeah. And all these folks are, some of them are alums, some of them are strangers. We don't know everybody in the group, but it's just a community that we form, and we hang out, and we have a very, very active WhatsApp group on which we don't allow good morning messages. So without further ado, we'll jump into the conversation. So the structure will be the standard structure. I'm going to ask a few questions of Mariam, and then we'll open it out, and I'll be moderating the questions, and Mariam will be able to answer all the questions. So the first question I have is, you've been writing since, very, very young years. So what got you into writing? What got you started?
It's not just me. I think that anyone who writes in any language, there's a fascination with sounds, with words, and how they represent reality. I think all of us who write say how the words that you use in any language, how it expresses what you're trying to say.
Right.
And that may be in poetry, that may be in prose or in theater, anything. I think that's what I was like as a child. I was fascinated with words and sounds and word pictures. And I think a lot of children are, because I do workshops for children for many, many years. Right. And I find that they're really fascinated by. I remember the first little poem, I think I was 6 years old or 7. I wrote something like, look at the moon, there is no one to be its groom, and yet it shines so brightly. So it was something nightly. These are all, the rhythm and the rhyme and the alliteration, and it fascinates children and adults. That's why you'll find that what is the difference between literary writing and technical writing? That's the difference. Is that how you use the language? That is the basic difference between literature and, say, engineering.
Right. So tell us about the first book. How much of a challenge was it? What year was it? What was the publishing scene like?
Children's book. The children's book.
Whichever was your very first book that you published.
My very first book was a children's book, and I don't think there was much of a challenge, because Harper Collins had just launched their Indus Peacock. The challenge was that there were people were not really computer savvy in publishing houses, or I wasn't computer savvy. I had a typewriter. It was an electronic typewriter, but it wasn't anything, very. I couldn't see what I'd written, and the pages would come out, and I'd make mistakes and like that. So that was a challenge, basically. I think the stories I already knew in my head, because 5 of them were folk and fairy tales which had come down by word of mouth in my family, and some of them you can still find on the net. Like sometimes I do a workshop, and some of the children know the story of Gharib Das, which is a very popular story.
Right.
And so I just translated them into English, and 5 stories were actually women's issues, under the guise of fairy tales. But people were publishing very different things in those days because, there is a way of writing a tale. There is a kind of a scheme that it follows, and it has a certain purpose. That you begin with once upon a time there was, and people were writing very differently. They were writing stories to please children, like, oh, here comes the tiger, there comes the, whatever, the eagle, and with a lot of illustrations. Well, my book was very different because it was illustrated by a well-known artist who's a friend of mine, and it was in black and white. I don't have it here, unfortunately. And it was quite different. It was not meant only for children because it had all these tales which are folk and fairy tales. And if you haven't studied folk and fairy tales, which I find very few universities do that. I found that in Chandigarh University. The purpose of folk and fairy tales, why they're written in a certain way, why there is a certain, démarche, what is it called? A kind of and then it comes to the denouement.
Right.
That folk and fairy tales have been they have been analyzed and by many writers as to, because they are very deeply connected to the psyche and cultures of peoples. So that is why they are written like that. There are certain qualities in a human being that are expected in that, and very often they put forward a certain agenda, which is, so that is what. So it was interesting to write. That was easy for me. Then getting it illustrated, because my friend did everything. I was in Pune in the NDA where my husband was posted. But this friend of mine who illustrated it, she helped out. She decided the font, and she's a very well-known artist. She's won a Lifetime Achievement Award and all that. That time she was not in '94, but she was still as talented as she is now. So she did everything for me, which was very lucky for me.
Right. Great.
So I didn't do very much except write the stories.
It's very interesting that you use the word tale, because I think, we are all stuck on book and novel and story, but we don't use the word tale. And it's quite refreshing, quite nice to actually hear that word.
Really, I'm surprised because tales are, it has such a wealth of connotation.
Yeah,
tale.
Exactly. Yeah. So I love that, and I love the fact that you're talking about that. So tell us about your writing process. Do you have like a fixed methodology? Like when you read Murakami and some of these other guys, they're like very regimented and structured, saying "हम तो ऐसे लिखते हैं भाई." तो आप कैसे लिखते हो?
I'm like my life is I take decisions as and when they come. Like if I feel something inspires me. Like earlier, I used to write stories for children in every place that I used to go to. So I've got, if you know my books, I've got stories set in Bengal, in Sikkim, in Pune, so wherever I used to go, I used to observe the children and the language they speak. And I sort of try to put that atmosphere into my story. Because I feel
Putul and the Dolphins is Bengal, right?
Pardon?
Putul and the Dolphins.
Putul and the Dolphins. Putul, of course, means Buria. It means doll in Bengali.
Fish news. I'm
Sorry, I'm just gonna. Can you? Yes, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Since we started talking about Bengal, I think Bengali lady started talking. Anyway, Bengali. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I interrupted you. We got interrupted. Go ahead, please.
That's fine. So they have, like, every place has sort of a charming. There's one story which is set in Goa, which is not exactly for children, but it's one of my favorite stories. It was published in, get the name, an online journal, and it was published again, I think, by some other anthology.
And what's
it's called River of Secrets.
What's the total number of books published so far, Mariam?
I don't know. I mean, I've got two novels.
Something like that?
Yeah.
Or more. If you count the series of 6 you just did, it'll probably be 25 or 26 now.
Which series of 6?
The ones for the Buddhist organization, Eternal Ganges.
Yeah, but those are not my stories. Okay. I mean, I mentored the books. I wrote most of the poems in it, etc. But it's not under my name.
Okay.
They were about 6 ladies.
Right.
Of different, who taught different classes and would write. And they wrote from KG to class 5. So I mentored those people into how to write. 2 weeks I mentored them thoroughly, and I edited their work.
Okay.
So it was my baby in a sense, but the stories didn't come from me.
Okay.
So I did 4 books 5 books for the Johns Hopkins University. Then there were 4 books along with Mr. Bharat Shekhar for Terry, Bring Your Life. So I do various things, and then there are various plays. And
that actually raises the next question, because a lot of people, advice that people get as writers is that you should stick to a genre and you should write in your genre, and you should not kind of go all over the place.
You sort of spread yourself a bit thin, because then people identify with you with either this or that, and they ignore them.
But you've written novels, you've written, which have been very highly acclaimed. You've written plays, and then you've written children's books. So how does it work for you to go, from one genre to the other, move around in genres? Does that make a difference to, things and how publishers for you?
Since I write a lot for children, and since I do workshops for children and all, and children's stories are shorter, and they're more visual, they take a shorter time to write. But you know how it is, Chetan, when you write a novel, you've really got to plunge deep into it. And you've got to shut out a whole lot of other things to be able to complete that novel.
Right.
And you've got to go deep inside yourself to find out what you're trying to say. If you want to write a good book.
Right.
What am I trying to say? What do I want out of this? What is it? What is my original contribution to the world that I'm trying to do? It's not simply about writing a book. It may be for a lot of people, but I think for a writer, a book is any book actually, and I'm very highly invested in the stories I did for the HIV children, very, very highly invested, because I met children of, that from those backgrounds, and I'm very emotionally invested in those books. But for a novel, you see, it has to be consistent from the beginning to the end. You can't afford to make mistakes. So you have to know your characters, you have to know your settings, you have to know the plot before you write it. I mean, we are not Shakespeare, that we don't go back on a single word. So, you have to know what you're doing. Otherwise, if you draw a truth table, you'll find that there are a lot of inconsistencies and discrepancies in what you might do if you're not invested enough, if you don't concentrate enough.
Right. And there are legendary stories of the battles you've had with editors. Tell us about that.
No, those are legendary. It's true. Unfortunately, what should editors be? Are they simply people who know what the market is all about? What do they want? Basically, editors do want you to have, they want you to sell. What else? They're commercial people. There's some things they will have as classics they will put forward because they've already tried and tested those books.
Right.
But if you're kind of new and there's something which they feel is different and which the people who are reading today, look at the reading public. What do they read? You have niche, people who write for a certain community of discourse, a very small amount of a number of people who will read a certain kind of work. Like mine is not mainstream. It's difficult, my work.
Yeah.
So I should not expect that I'm going to, unless my publisher had actually promoted me very highly, because it was a literary work and it is now, a part of a course in a university. But had the publisher done that, but my editor was a young person, a gentleman. I don't know if he was a gentleman, but he didn't understand. He didn't understand the book. And he was he was a bit proud of himself that he was an editor in Penguin. And so when I said, you don't understand, he was upset. He said, I, the Penguin editor, I don't understand. So there's a lot of things one can't understand. Even Einstein said that he does know a lot of things. So, this is a kind of a social there's social barriers. Then what do they want? I think, Chetan, you came to see that play, which was called The Undoing in Gurgaon.
Yeah.
That had a lot of what I went through with the publisher.
Right. Yeah.
It was not Selvamary has not
been Selvamary. You're right. It was The Undoing.
Selvamary has not been performed. I wish it were, but it hasn't been.
Okay.
So the publisher said that the editor, I would not say publisher, said that what is this all about? This woman is she's insane because she thinks too much. She's a Muslim woman. Why should she think too much? I mean, obviously, he'd not read and even heard of Quratul and Haider, or Atiya Habibullah, or any one of these people. Why can't Muslim women think? And who was that? Fatima, who started the first university in the world that is still functioning, the University of Fez in Morocco.
Okay.
That was started by a woman, Fatima al-Shiri. I forgot her name. So what I'm saying is that these prejudices in our minds, that even you may be anything, you may be a doctor. A doctor may have prejudices that no, you can't have this. This may be your problem, but the doctor's refusing to accept it because he has this whatever sex prejudices, that, or people have caste prejudices also, as So there are these things. I have as a manuscript assessor, I have assessed manuscripts in which the people were extremely prejudiced against certain castes or something, and then of course they weren't published, but they feel very annoyed. So it's a real it's not easy. You have to either change your work, like what they wanted me to do was to change my writing and put the protagonist out of the way because she was mad, and bring in the political aspect because that would sell, because it was set in a time, the Pokhran blasts and all that. So it was obviously, it is a political book in many ways. The politics is just a background.
So, but you refused.
Time.
Right?
I refused outright, and everyone told me, "Oh, you're publishing with Penguin. Do what they say." I said, "No, I would not. This is something that I've written, and it's very important to me, So I'm not going to." So I said, "Just give it back to me." So then the editor said, "No, we've signed a contract, and now we'll not change a word." So they didn't even proofread it properly, and it was just published, and they didn't promote it. When it was nominated for the biggest, it was the first novel from this country that was nominated for the IMPAC International Award, which is the biggest international award, which accepts translations also. And they didn't put that little tag along with it saying it's been nominated. They didn't do anything. So, I mean, it was a loss. Had I met a more, understanding, more understanding of ecofeminism, an editor.
Right.
Anyway, that was that. Then I got it back after 5 years. And after that, I was republished it with Vitasta.
Right. So a lot of people, or some people I know, are definitely interested in writing children's books. And that's so is it very different, or is it very specialized, the publishing industry for children's books?
There are lots of publishers for children's books.
Okay.
Lots of publishers. That's the good thing. And children's books are, there are more children's books which are published. So that is another thing. There's small publishers, there are big publishers, there's of course Puffin, and there's, so you can try your luck with many. And they're very good publishers. Like my publisher who's published most of my books is Tulika. Tulika is an NGO based in Chennai. And they translate the books into several Indian languages.
Okay.
Which is really nice because, you know that your book is getting read by people who don't read English.
Sure. Yeah.
Children, that's very, very nice. Like Putul and the Dolphins is selling the maximum number of books in Hindi. Okay. The Hindi belt, Madhya Pradesh, UP, Bihar.
Okay. And when you're doing a book for kids, and in a lot of your books, which I've also seen, there is always illustrations. How does that work? Do you come up with the concept and work with an illustrator and then go to the publisher, or do you have the concept and you go to the publisher and they find you an illustrator? I mean, how is that whole thing?
No, see, Chetan, it depends on the book that you're doing. For example, Tulika has its editors, and they get their own illustrations done.
Okay.
So they are the ones, like for a writer, it's the publishers who write the illustration briefs, the editors basically.
Okay.
And but if you're doing a project like I did for the Johns Hopkins University,
right? So
I wrote all the illustrations briefs and everything. I did that, and I worked with the illustrators because I knew them. Like one of them is Praiti Roy, who's very well known, much awarded illustrator. She lives in Shantiniketan. And she did Putul, the first one. And then after that, she did several of my other books. And then I got her into the Johns Hopkins project.
Okay.
And so I worked with her. And there's another friend of mine called SM Arun, who is actually an animator, aviator, and he did one of the books because it was for older children. And he did that on the computer.
Oh.
Then for the Terry books, the books on Green Your Life, the Green Your Life series, 4 of them. So I worked with the project manager and the illustrators, because that the illustrations were the way we wrote them, it was like you write instructional design.
Okay.
Which side of the page, what is going to come? Because it was, there were a lot of activities,
Sure.
and there was so much on one page to see those books. That's so I sort of designed, this was very difficult to actually get this concept through. There's going to be a kind of a string running along the page like this.
Okay.
And then all the illustrations inside the book, there's going to be a link between that illustration and then something outside that string, where it's going to explain that concept. With either an illustration or some words, and mostly illustrations. It was quite interesting.
Okay. So you've got all these projects which you've done, like the Eternal Ganges project, Johns Hopkins, the AIDS project. How do you get these projects? I mean, do people just find you because of the body of work you've created or your reputation as a writer?
Yeah, they do find me. Like Johns Hopkins found me through somebody.
Okay.
Then, and Terry, I don't know how Terry found me, but they did.
Okay, but they all find you. You don't go out marketing yourself. You don't go out and trying to find projects. They just turn up.
I've done just a few projects, not many.
Okay.
And they, it's not as if I've done so many. Maybe if I'd gone out, maybe I would have done some more. But I don't.
All right, great. So this is awesome. What is the so it's 5:25. What we'll do is open it up for Q&A. So questions that you guys have, folks, you can just put them in the chat as always, and then I'll just. You don't have to do anything, Mariam. The participants will type out their questions, and then we'll just go through them and we'll talk about those questions.
Okay, you'll read them out for me?
Yes, I'll read them out for you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, I can't offer you any chai.
Yeah, that looks good. I've had my tea though.
All right. While we're waiting, I wanted to, I can see some of the folks on here, and one of them is Ram. Ram has been a long-term participant. And Ram, this is a book that you had recommended. I picked it up finally. So I'm just started it, but yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
It's awesome.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
So far, it's been just mind-blowing. It's
Yeah.
really very good. Yeah.
Yeah, what does it say? I mean, anything interesting that you can talk about?
It's called Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. That's the name of the book. It will be inverted on your screen, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's showing correctly.
Okay, so it's Self-Editing for Fiction Writers by Rennie Brown and Dave King. And the first thing he or they talk about is the show and tell. And they what makes it interesting is that they've used a whole bunch of examples, and they've talked about where it's done right and where it's not done right, and how people land up messing it up. So it's not just editing like at the
it's like macro editing also. Yes.
Yeah, it's structural
editing. It makes a lot of difference. Yeah. I've done macro editing for some writers who are my friends.
Right.
And that's really helped. What you should put first and what you should put next in the book itself, in the story.
Yeah, and they also have these illustrations in between, which are very interesting. But they use these two phrases, which I thought were brilliant. But anyway, we'll come back to this.
We're getting some questions.
Yes, we're getting some questions. So the first one is from Nandini, and she's saying that I'm in the process of writing a children's novel. What worries me most is if my audience will connect with it. So how do I cross that barrier?
What's your target audience? Do you have a target audience, or it's for everybody? Like I sometimes write for everyone, any age group.
Right now, I'm looking to write for children between the ages of, let's say, 10, maybe 8 to 12, the middle age group, the tween audience rather.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I'm targeting. But yeah, I guess the everybody thing is something that I haven't thought of. Like, would it be a book for everybody is something I didn't think of.
Yeah, I mean, can the parents also read it? Would they like to read it? Because I think that children, actually, children read, there's some books which of course are difficult for children because of the vocabulary that you use. So you just see the length of the sentences and the vocabulary, and even some of the concepts which they may not understand between 10. See, 8 is very young. 8 and 12, there's a huge difference. you know.
Okay.
So I would think that 10 to 12 they're closer to each other, and
Okay.
6 to 8 are closer. 8 to 12 is middle school, yes, but it doesn't always work in writing. So if you have, you have to see what concepts. So give me an example of what concepts you have. I'll just tell you whether.
Mostly, I'm making it a kind of a mystery, which I think, I don't know, the closest reference I would give you is maybe as simple as an. Sorry, Five Fine Doctors or the Famous Five or anything like that, where it's a younger set of children who are trying to solve a mystery. So that's the kind of.
And what kind of mystery are you looking at? Because you see now what has happened is with television and with all these OTTs and all, there's some terrible things coming into our homes.
Yes.
They are driving our kids crazy, and a lot of parents allow their kids to sit with them where they're eating their chips or their dinner and they're watching this crime patrol and terrible things. So then, kids who are in school, the teachers will recommend कि आप ये किताब पढ़ाइए बच्चों को.
Right.
So what is the kind of mystery? What is it? What has happened?
So I think the major plot point over here is about how a certain fungus is, because of environmental damage, is actually causing people to, I think the easiest word is become zombies of some sorts, and the children have to solve as to why it's happening and how to stop it. So the setting is all set into the space where there is a background story as to why the children are there and why they even come across all this.
They're in space. They're in space.
No, they're not in space. No. I mean, I'm saying the setting is such that it justifies why the children would come across something like this.
Okay.
And the essential portion is they're trying to solve a very, a time-bound thing where they're trying to help people and, resolve this kind of, the situation which is arising where there is a chance that the adults around them become zombies, and how do they save all of them? So,
quite scary.
But yeah, you're right. It's absolutely on point for the current age of children, because they think in that entire set of, the genre is perfectly for them.
Yeah. No, that's fine. It's quite interesting. But you have to see that you don't make it too complicated for them, like, the scientific part of it.
Right.
But still, you should explain the science behind it. That what happens? Why do they become zombies? Which part of the brain does it attack?
Okay.
So that, they learn something. And then, of course, then they're the villains, and the villains must not be too dangerous, of course, so that they don't kill the children outright.
No, I don't want a book which is so sadistic. But
villains,
it does. But then
get caught in the end.
Absolutely, that will be there. But I don't want it to be sadistic to the point that any of the children get hurt or
Yeah, that's what you can't do that. With that
age.
Yeah, unless you're Harry Potter, and then that's awful.
No, nothing so dark.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I think it's fine. Sounds interesting. But what is it that you're finding difficult?
Exactly what I mean, I wasn't really sure of who would like it. Like, you said I should make it closer to 10 to 12. So I can.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting, and you might get somebody like Terry to publish it, because Terry has all these kinds of books.
Terry.
That is the Engineering Resource Institute.
Oh, okay.
Pasricha, Professor.
Okay.
Because they have these kind of things, mysteries in which you have, people trying to save the environment, basically, because it's the Environment Research Institute, not engineering. Sorry, Environment
and Research Institute.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure, that'll be lovely to consider. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, but I like the idea that you gave, that would an adult like to read it? I think, yes, I would want the book. Maybe a few adults who want to read it should also be able to explore it. Yeah.
They should be able to. They should read it, actually.
Yeah.
Adults should read children's books. There's this whole divide between adults and children, which is nonsense, because every adult has a child inside them. And they've got children. If they have children, then they definitely should read them.
All right. Great.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Yes. The next question was from Ram. He's saying you've written for children and for grown-ups. Is the process and how you approach the writing for the two categories different? Hello?
Yes. The writing is a process different.
So he's saying, is the process and how you approach the writing for the two different, children and grown-ups?
Yes, it is, because then when I'm writing for children, I appeal to my inner child, I think. And I think of all the most wonderful things that could happen and in the book, and all the wonderful sounds that I could use, and something more, definitely more positive. But when you write for adults, maybe you think of a darker aspect, something sadder, and also part of it. I mean, unless you're writing a comedy. But if you're writing a serious book, there are lots of things in it, which you would say, which you would not approach in a children's book. Because you don't want to put, even if you write something like my books about HIV, there are there are things about children who are dying, but because it's the truth for children like that. But you approach it from a point of view in which you make life beautiful, however short it is. But you may not do that in a story for adults. You may bring out a very stark aspect. I mean, I don't always do that, but it's possible. I mean, that's the way I'm looking at it intellectually, what I might do, not what I have done, because I don't think I have done that consciously. Consciously, I have not done any of these things. But yes, consciously, I would not like to write for children something dark or sad, or it may be sad, but it has to be put forward in a way which is more beautiful aesthetically, emotionally. It should be very positive.
And what about when you're writing for grown-ups, or maybe that's writing for yourself? I mean,
no. Yeah, of course, it is writing for yourself, because you're doing what you can do.
Right.
You can only do what you can do. What you think that it's possible for you and what is important for you.
Right.
To do. So when you're doing that, so that depends. Like, sometimes you take all aspects of human life, and then you try to look at from the point of view of somebody who may, be very unhappy, or somebody who may be very happy, or somebody who may have been in a bad mental state. So these things they're part of adult life, which one deals with.
Okay, great. Then there's a question from Manish. She's asked, have you mentored children to write and publish their stories, like a one-on-one mentorship?
No. I've done a lot of workshops for 25 years. I've been doing workshops, and children have published. Like, very often when I do a workshop in a school or in a group of children, I do encourage them to publish, like a collection or something. I haven't followed it up to see if they have published, but I know some of the children that I have done workshops for have become poets and filmmakers. There's one girl, she was in class 9, I think, or 7 when I did a workshop for her. She's very well known. She plays the piano, she composes music, and she writes poetry. So it's very nice to see that, but I can't say that I have done it for them. They're already, that's just one part of their lives.
Right. The next question is from Sai. She says, since you write for children, what are your thoughts about a child's perspective in a novel meant for adults, especially if they observe political events that impact their psyche?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because see, as children, I'm sure people are interested in reading. Haven't you read adult books meant for adults? Like, I remember at 12 years of age, I was reading Somerset Maugham and, like Dostoevsky and all that. I may not have understood the whole thing, but I was reading it, and and those books kind of made my brain work in a different way. And I think children can read books which are for adults. If they can read them, they should read them. Why not? Maybe they can read them again. But at that point, it's not. Yes, I.
Yeah, my question actually is about a child character who's a child in the novel.
Character in the novel.
Yes, and is a witness to political events. The novel is meant for adults.
Ice Candy Man. Ice Candy Man.
Yes. It's actually very close to that. Yeah. So in fact, I wanted to ask you about that, because I was not very clear in this aspect. I'm struggling in those aspects around the childhood, because I'm doing this whole series on working with partition witnesses, where children who migrated during 1947 or around that period, how do they recall their
you have people who are like maybe in their 70s or 80s.
Yes.
When they were children, they 80s probably now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the people I knew who were children, they are like now in their 80s. That's very interesting. You better get them fast before they just go away.
Yes. Yes. So I've interviewed them. Yes, I've interviewed them, but it's in a very non-fiction sense, right? So the narrative is very, very adult-like, politically correct. Some of them are emotive, but in a novel, I would want to hear from you that, because I do feel that, even I as a child, I remember what happened in 92, or I remember what happened in 1984, right? It may not be logical. You may do research. So how do you really present that? Right.
Think of yourself. I mean, I'm just saying it off the cuff as what I would do. I would think it from a point of view, think visually that you are a very small person. What can you see? You're just standing next to the, the hems of people's, kurtas, or when they're talking about partition, or you can see their shoes much closer than you would see, and you can hear their voices coming from very far away. If you think of it visually, then you'll be able to, you have the stories, right? You have some stories. Think of those stories from a point of view of a small child. Then this one said that, and what did they mean? I'll tell you, I've written a story which is going to be published in Urdu and Hindi first by the National Book Trust. I wrote it in English. It's called New Mother. But it's actually about, the accidents, the threshing accidents which happen in the fields of India. The threshers are very dangerous. Now, this is an adult issue if you look at it, but how it impacts children. So there's this small child, there are two children in the village who lose their mother to the thresher, like hands. It actually happened to some people I knew. So when you put the wheat in the thresher or the grain, your hand can go inside it. The threshers are not designed perfectly. And I think 34% of all farming accidents, accidental deaths, are caused by threshers. So I use this and this background, and I wrote this little story. So there's this little child called Duldul, or something like that. And he says, Naima, it's in Hindustani, it's like, Naima, ख्याल रखना, अपना हाथ अंदर मत डाल देना, फिर उसकी बहन आती है. You all understand Hindi?
Yeah.
Urdu? So then the little, the बहन आती है रोटी लेके, फिर उनका कुत्ता आता है उसके साथ. There's this whole story which is woven around that village life, and then there's the leopard who comes at night to get the dog, and then the people come, and then at the end when the leopard comes and he catches hold of the dog's leg, and then the dog escapes, and so this little child thinks that, and the people say we have to kill the leopard. The leopard is called Guldar. If you people are familiar with the word Guldar, Gul means phool, na? So uske upar phool bane hote hain. It's called Guldar. The leopard in Hindustani. And so they say Guldar ko marna hai, Guldar ko maar dena chahiye, bahut khatarnak hai. So the little child thinks, magar hum ye jo machine hai, इनको क्यों हम लोग एक्सेप्ट करते हैं, इनको हम क्यों कुछ नहीं करते, इनसे भी तो लोग मर जाते हैं. I mean, the whole story is around that. So it's an adult tale, but from the point of view this little child who's, वो आदमी बहुत लंबे थे, उनके साफे बहुत दूर से दिखाई दे रहे थे. फिर सब लोग, जब उसने कहा कि हम इससे भी तो लोग मरते हैं, तो वो अपना मुंह लटका के वो सब चले गए. और फिर उनका कुत्ता, पता नहीं उसका क्या नाम था, वो बोला, it's like that. It ends like that. They said they want to publish it in Urdu and Hindi first, then they'll publish it in the NBT.
Thank you so much. I think that perspective.
Does that answer your question?
No, I think the perspective around distance, to some extent, it answered my question. The perspective around distance, because this character is on a tricycle, and this is real incident. When they shot dead.
It's on a tricycle, and then you can see, so many things will be passing. So there will be pictures, passing pictures. Nani ki nao chali, like you have Ashok Kumar's this thing.
Yes.
All right.
Answer your question.
Great, thanks. Yes. The next question was from Shalini, where she's asked, what is the usual word count for books for young and not so young kids?
That's a difficult question. I can tell you it's about, if you have a picture book, a flat picture book, it's like about 20 pages maximum. And otherwise, if you have a 20 pages, will not, because there are pictures in it. So one page may have, depends on the layout. One page may have just 5 lines. Another may have 25. So you can't really, if you look at the average, I don't know. And for books for not so young kids, be about between 60 and 80 pages, slim volume that you have, maximum 60 to 80 pages.
All right. Then the next question says that what is the forum for kids to write, to learn writing and publishing? What is the forum for kids to learn to write and publish? Do you know of one?
There are lots of them. They're online, but I don't really go there.
Okay.
Because I'm not so sure about. I haven't made up my mind whether kids should start publishing very early or not. They can write, they can make their scrapbooks, and because what happens is you get too much exposure, and not even for these little kids dancing on television. They get too much exposure too quickly, and very ambitious parents will want they'll show the book around in their office circles. My child has published. I'm not so sure that's a good idea, because you have to give the child alone time to grow up, to interact with the world themselves before you actually put them out there. But so I'm not so sure. I'm not very, very familiar with these.
Sorry, the next question is from Vandana. She's saying, ma'am, you've been very lucky to be found by publishers and illustrators, but how do we, the general folks, find them? How should we approach them? That is how should it be impressive?
I haven't been found always. There are lots of things which I would like to do. Like Tulika, I approached myself. I approached the whole sheaf of stories, out of which they published picture books. Others were published in journals. Like I've been writing so many stories. I still have a lot of unpublished stories. So it's not as if, you don't get rejections. Everyone gets rejections. You should just keep trying. You have to know which kind of a publishing house will publish what. Now you have so many children's, publishing houses. You can just approach them and see if they publish. This one, which is being published by NBT, was rejected by Tulika. They said first they liked it, then they said, no, we don't have the space for it. Tulika is my most, I published most of my books with Tulika. And then I've written another story, which is, I'm still looking for a publisher. It's of another, because, I think that one should write things which are important, I feel. So I've written a story about a non-binary child. You know what is non-binary children? Yes? They are children who can identify neither as men or women, girls or boys. They're confused. Because there are some scientific reasons for non-binary children, which have got to do with, the kind of the twins that they may have been, or whatever. There are lots of scientific, and how there are these prejudices and stigma attached to non-binary children. So I thought it was important, and I think there's only one book for non-binary children that I found. So I've written it, but Tulika didn't want to publish it. They already had, so I'm looking for a home for it, and I'll continue to do so. So you have to persevere a bit, quite a bit, in order to find, that is, if you're writing what you wanted to write. If you want to write something that other people want to read, it probably will be easier.
And I wanted to add, it's almost, it's all, I think it's very unfair to just say that you were lucky to be found by publishers and illustrators.
I wasn't. Look at my age, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, you should go and read Mariam's work. You should go and just Google her name. Just, go to Amazon and put her name. It's like 2 pages worth of material that's out there in multiple languages. So Mariam has done a lot of work, and it's very, very high quality work. So the reason why that
hard work, and it's sometimes it's quite disappointing, especially if you're a young writer. I can give you a story about when I was 21 years old.
Sure.
We used to have a lot of cats, when I was 20 years old. So I know a lot about cats, I mean, maybe not as much as Cats, the movie, but a different kind of, I know how cats grow up, how they talk to each other. I can even talk to a cat, so I'm basically was a cat person. I don't have any cats now. I'm a very animal person. If you've seen my books, all about animals. So I went, this very high profile lady who was there, who moved in, very high English lady. She was considered very nice and all that. So I went to her and I went with an illustration which I had made, a painting, an oil, not oil, sorry, a watercolor. And I went there in the Connaught Place, they have a publishing house. And she made me feel so small about myself. She didn't smile. She was very well known. Poor thing, she's no more in this world, so I should not say anything about her. But she made me feel so unhappy. I can't tell you. I was just 21 years old. And then after 35 years, I went to one of her memorial lectures. I mean, she's so well known that she has memorial lectures. And there I found that she'd written a book about cats. It was very much like mine. And obviously she didn't want my stories. I was so shocked. I told the people I'd gone with, I said, that's why she rejected my stories. Because they're so much closer to cats, and she wanted to write about cats. And she published after me, She was also probably a cat person. But she made me feel as though I'd written a whole lot of nonsense. And I was really upset. And you're so young. You think that a person of such importance, such a well-known person is telling you that you're useless, you must be. So never do that. That's when, I wouldn't like to tell children that. I would never, 21 is also kind of a child, I think, at least I was.
Okay. Varal Iyer that's a lovely story, lovely tale. Thank you for that. Varal Iyer also has a question. She says, I recently read Charlie Mackessy's The Boy, which was a gift. And given the illustrations, automatically assumed it's a children's book. Safe to say I was pleasantly surprised and loved the book. My question is that if you sometimes intend your books to double up as books for adults, do you write keeping an age group in mind, or is it kind of open?
I don't, but people do. See, it's actually a commercial thing. I don't personally. Have you read The Water Babies? Any of you? It's a book which anybody, Alice in Wonderland, prime example.
Of course. Yeah.
Children would read it. Jabberwocky, it was brillig and the slithy toves, there are these words that children would like, but what do they mean? Even the caucus race is a political, satire. So you have something like that which you can read. But so therefore, I feel that the books written for children should be able to be read by adults. But what has happened is, in India, especially in India, I'll tell you, I don't know about other places, parents don't read what their children read. They don't want to read. They don't want to invest in their reading. A lot of parents are not educated in India. They have never read. They've come into the middle class without having grown up with books at all. Or they have been told stories on their grandmother's knee. So they know the value of stories, but they don't know which book should I buy for my child. So 8 to 10, 10 to 14. That helps them. So that helps the publishers to sell their books. That helps the bookshops to store the books, because they have to put them in certain places. All these things are very important, for the entire process to take place, from when a writer writes a book and when it goes to a bookshop where a person buys it. So it just helps in the process. So that's why people do this. But I don't do it deliberately. I leave it to the publisher. If they want to publish it in this category or that category, they can do it. But I write a story. And like Putul and the Dolphins, I didn't mean it to be for 4 to 10 or 8-year-olds or whatever. But they put it in the 4 to 8 category, but that's for their own sales. But Putul and the Dolphins, read by adults, are also, it's much appreciated. People love the story. So that's what I mean.
So we have just a couple of minutes left. So there are 2 more questions. If you can just answer them very quickly. One is, have you written books for 1 to 3-year-olds? That's a yes, no answer. Have you written kids for 1 to 3-year-olds?
1 to 3-year-olds?
Yeah.
3-year-olds is, if you like, for example, in this series that I was telling you, with Eternal Ganges, there are those little poems that I've written that could be used by a 3-year-old. 1-year-olds, no. Okay. 1 to 3-year-olds have those books which are made of fabric, fabric books.
Yeah.
They have these lovely fabric books which you can wipe their mouth with also if they're eating. But I don't know really whether I actually have no philosophy about whether 1 to 3-year-olds should read, although with my own son at the age of 1.5, because I think, listen to classical music when you're expecting a baby, show the babies books but my son gave up reading at the age of 12 after Harry Potter. Now he reads only very, heavy intellectual stuff like Hobbes and Kant. And, he doesn't read fiction anymore.
Right. Well, I'm going to skip the last question because we're really out of time. But I want to take 2 minutes and just quickly look at the dashboard. Mariam, this will be interesting for you also. But this group, it's 50 people. They've actually written, as per the log, there's 71,000 words that have been written over the last 5 days by this group.
Wow.
That's the total.
71,000 words.
71,000 words. That's like almost like an entire.
That's a full novel. Yeah.
That's a full novel. This is first draft material, of course, but this is how much work has been done. For those of you who have not been updating the tracker, please do. This is just a start, so we're not going to spend too much more time on the tracker or talking about the word count, but keep at it. Remember, Ram's analysis told us that the second week is the most difficult because you have a very good honeymoon in the first 5 days, and then when you hit the second week is when that dip starts to happen, and you're like, man, this is too hard to sustain.
But how many weeks have you got to write a book? 4 weeks to write a book?
We're not telling people to write a book. We're saying you set your own goals, but you have to write through the month of September. That's it. Somebody's goal is 20,000 words. Somebody's goal could be 70,000, 60,000, whatever you want. But your goal is to write through the month of September. And but you have to try and do a little bit every day to make sure that you get to that goal by the end of the day.
One should do that. Yeah, I don't.
So that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea. And the second week is where there is a dip. So maybe what you should do is, think of a nice reward for yourself, and think of how you can keep yourself motivated through the dip, which you should be expecting. I wanted to just close by thanking, and I wanted to mention before we move out that Sharanya is going to be with us next week. She's a poet as well as an author, and this will be the first interaction that we'll have with her. But it's been fantastic having you, Mariam. I think.
Thank you so much. It was very nice to talk to all of them. I wish I could have met each one individually, but too many.
I should tell you this little story that we did one. So Mariam was the very first external faculty the Himalayan Writing Retreat ever had.
Yeah, that was so nice. Yeah.
And then we did the second one in the mountains. We stayed here for a week. She came over. We had an interesting group, right? We had two Americans. We had a doctor.
Remember the cook?
Yeah.
James Carson.
James. He's still in touch with me.
We cooked food, and he's with me on Facebook also.
So he's a celebrity chef. And I'll actually post the video in the group because Mariam was a great sport, and we did that little video about other things that you learn at a writing retreat.
How to eat with your fingers.
Yeah, where Mariam is teaching this American guy how to eat with your hands.
He's a cook for Keanu Reeves. Am I right?
He's a celebrity cook.
He's a chef. He's a celebrity chef.
He goes to these houses
and makes
big shots and
people like Keanu Reeves and Angelina Jolie.
Yeah. So, but it's been awesome fun. So thanks so much. And
thank you so much. It's very nice meeting all of you, and I hope that you people become, celebrity writers very soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks a lot. God bless. Bye.
Right. Take care. You. Bye.
How do I get the switch this? I can't go away. This is like Hotel California.
You can check out anytime you like. I'll end the session, then you'll automatically go away. She left. Okay, she left.